One of the common themes of questions that I get asked is for advice when buying a dive computer, and that kind of makes sense. Your dive computer is going to be probably one of the most expensive pieces of diving equipment that you're investing in, and if you get it right, it might be the one and only dive computer that you ever need. So in this video, I'm going to break down a few features to look out for and compare, as well as some tips and tricks that may save yourself some money when it comes to actually buying a dive computer. You have a few choices when it comes to batteries, and each suit a different personality. One of the more common battery types is a user changeable battery. They're typically standard watch button batteries, single use, or not single dive, but once the batteries run out, you recycle it responsibly. They do take some time and a little bit of skill to replace, and you need to replace the O-ring seal with the battery as well. So you do need a proper battery kit. You can't just buy the battery, because the O-ring, you basically need a fresh one every time you change that battery. These are typically found in segment display dive computers, and they can last a very, very long time, like years, depending on how much you use it, obviously. Color screen dive computers use more power, so they tend to have rechargeable batteries, like a bit like your smartphone, that you either recharge with a USB cable or one of those charging mats. These are good because you can top them up between dives, but eventually, just like your smartphone, after enough recharges, the built-in battery loses its potency. It's a trade-off. With disposable batteries, you do run the risk of the computer running out of power mid-dive, and the risk of flooding if you don't replace the seal properly when you're changing the batteries. But when you do swap the battery and it is all good, then your computer is basically as good as new. Rechargeable batteries, you can top them up so you always have plenty of power for the next dive, but eventually a full charge won't last as long as it used to. There are four common styles of dive computer. You get large screen dive computers, watch-sized dive computers, console-mounted ones, and heads-up displays. Large screen computers are the most common today. The large screen ensures that information is big, it's easy to read, but the entire unit is pretty big on the wrist, so it can catch on shoulder straps when you're trying to put your BCD on, and you of course do have to remember to strap it on at the beginning of the dive, because you're not wearing it all of the time, so if you forget to put it on, then you jump in the water and you don't have a dive computer. Watch-sized dive computers are just kind of scaled down so that you can wear them in and out of the water without raising too many eyebrows, and that kind of eliminates that problem because you're always wearing it. Then you never have to remember to put your dive computer on. They can have less information on each screen, so you may need to cycle through screens on the dive to find the information that you need that might be on just the one screen of a large screen dive computer. And the information is of course typically smaller, just to fit on the smaller screen, and the batteries are a little bit smaller as well, so you don't have the same amount of burn time. Console dive computers attach to your high pressure hose, and they typically replace your depth gauge and sometimes your pressure gauge as well. Whilst it does cut down on the amount of overall gear that you do need to invest in, it does remove a bit of redundancy, and your computer is of course now attached to your regulator, so you can't separate them at all. And when you're handing it up into a rib, yeah, you watch your expensive dive computer just get sort of flailing around in the deck of a boat. Also, if your dive computer runs out of battery during the dive, you lose both your dive computer and your gauges, so you don't even know how much gas you have left in your tank. So there's a trade-off there. Heads-up displays, or HUDs, are pretty rare, but they're typically either built into a dedicated mask, they attach onto a specific type of mask, or they attach onto your regulator in some kind of way to basically put a small screen in one corner of your mask so that you can glance at it just hands free, and that's quite useful just so that you can get on with things. You can check your depth and your NDL. The main reason why these haven't taken off that well is that they're either tricky to mount because it has to be either a specific mask, and if that mask doesn't fit you, then hey, you've just bought a really expensive computer that you can't really use, or a mask that's always annoying you. And even if it does fit, if you lose that mask, it gets kicked off for whatever reason, or you need to switch second stages, then you lose your dive computer as well. So most divers just opt for a large screen or a watch style dive computer that you mount onto your wrist, and they're the most practical in all sorts of different situations. And other than size, one of the main differences is that watch-sized computers often have apnea modes where large screen dive computers don't. One popular feature now that isn't in every single dive computer is wireless air integration. Instead of relying on checking your gauges, you fit a wireless air transmitter to one of the high pressure ports of your regulator. That then broadcasts your tank pressure to your dive computer, and the computer does a few clever things with that information. It obviously shows you your tank pressure so that you know how much gas you have left in the tank, but they also convert that using your breathing rate and your current depth to show how much gas time you have left, which can be quite useful for when to end the dive, or at least just dive planning on the go. It will tell you in minutes at the current depth and your current breathing rate how long that gas will last in minutes. You can also set alarms to alert you if you drop below a certain pressure, as well as logging all of this information. It is useful, but transmitters aren't cheap. They're typically around £200 to £300, but if it's something that you might want in the future, then it's a feature that you do need to look out for now. If your computer doesn't have that function, then you're going to have to reinvest in a second dive computer. Whereas if you do have that feature in the computer, even if you don't use it right now, you can just turn it on when you do get yourself a transmitter. If you have the time to wait, look forward to any upcoming seasonal offer periods. It's not unusual for the manufacturers and the dive retailers to offer either reduced prices or special offers around times like Black Friday and leading up to Christmas, where you can pick yourself up a good deal and save some money, especially if you're buying a computer with a transmitter. They love a free transmitter offer, or at least a reduced price transmitter offer when bought all together, and it's typically in the lead up to Christmas. If it's seasonal, then grab yourself a bargain, but sometimes it can be to sell through stock because a new version of a replacement dive computer is coming out. If that doesn't really matter to you, then buy away, go for it, save yourself some money. But if you would prefer the very latest upgraded technology, then there may be a new version that's going to be released a few weeks after the old version was on offer. It is a risky gamble, but it's not unusual for a discount to precede a new version to clear old stocks. And also pay attention to new dive computer upgraded versions being announced, because that means that any older stock that's still in stock at the dive center, they're going to want to get rid of that, so chances are those prices are going to start dropping. If you don't really have the time, you need a dive computer right now, then just be aware of where you're buying it from. The internet today is a very tricky place, and even if the website is in your language and in your currency, chances are it may be coming from another country, and that's why it's so cheap. That's not awful if the currency exchange works in your favor and everything goes nice and smoothly. However, shipping is probably going to take some time. That's not an issue, fine. But you need to think if there's going to be any kind of import fees and stuff like that. And the computer is also considered a grey import. If something breaks, it may not be covered by your country's warranty, and you may need to return it to the country that you bought it from. It's all done through that serial number, and they know exactly who they sent it to. So yeah, there's no way around this one. Double check exactly where your computer is coming from. More and more computers today are being made with color screens. They're much more intuitive because they often color code the information on the screen for you. If everything is white or green or whatever the good color is, then everything's fine. But when the numbers start to turn yellow or red, you can see on the screen what information you need to focus on. You can kind of filter out all of the rest, because at a glance you can see everything's fine. Wait, that number's red. Oh, I need to do something about that. They're less rigid as well. Like a TV or a phone screen, they can display full words and images, so they're much easier to understand. The computer, if it's trying to convey a message, it will write out the exact wording of what is going on. They do use a lot of power though, because they're typically backlit all the time, or at least they do have a dim function, so you're going to be recharging or replacing batteries more frequently. Segment displays or dot matrix screens are older technology, but they use far less power, so your battery is going to last a lot longer. Of course, depending on how much you use it, I mean, it can last up to years. Dot matrix is better than pure segment displays. Segment displays, they're very limited as to what they can display. It's just those, like, you know, the old digital clocks. It's just that, and that's all it can display. But lots of little segments, little squares in a matrix can spell out more complex information, and that's what you'll find on a dot matrix. And they've worked for decades, giving divers all the information they need, so they just work. They're very trustworthy, and they're also much cheaper. Once you reach a certain price, the more you spend, the more technical diving features you're going to get. And there's no point in paying for features that you're never going to use. It's like buying seat warmers and snow tires in a car when you live in the Bahamas. You're just not going to get any use out of those features, so why invest in them? The very cheapest of dive computers today will have all of the features that are essential to most recreational divers. It's going to have air, it's going to have nitrox, audible alarms. You might not have a backlight to be able to read in the dark, but you should have your torch anyway in the dark to be able to look at the screen. But after those basic functions, then when you start to pay more money, you start to find things like Bluetooth, digital compass, eventually wireless air integration, and before long you start to get into your color screens, and then you'll start to see features like Trimix and CCR. So set your budget and decide which features are most important for you to see, which dive computer actually falls in that price range. But the most expensive computer in that price range may not be the best dive computer for you. So do consider some of the cheaper options, unless you are definitely sure that one day you are going to use them. This one you should be aware of, and it might affect your decision process. It's not a huge issue, but it's something that you should at least consider. Now, there are two main decompression algorithms being used in dive computers today. There are a few more, but there are two big standout ones. You typically find either the Buhlmann, it would be like a ZHL16C algorithm, or a RGBM. So they both monitor gas levels in your tissues and your dive profile, and they'll both get you out of the water safely. But if you're diving one and your buddy is diving the other, you may find some discrepancy where your dive computer says that you're good to surface, but your buddy's dive computer says otherwise. The important thing to remember is that there's no real right or wrong answer here. There are ongoing debates online about which algorithm is better, and each algorithm then has its own variations. There's multiple versions of RGBM, and if you get Buhlmann with gradient factors, then you can adjust the conservatism factors. And as I said, it's not a huge issue which one you end up going for, but if you do dive with the same buddy all the time, it might be worth finding out which algorithm their dive computer uses, so that one of you isn't forever waiting on the other's dive computer to clear because it's more conservative and you have to dive to the more conservative dive computer. Gone are the days where you just get a rubber watch buckle strap with your dive computer. Now, with some computers, you get a choice. Rubber straps are certainly still around, and they're fine, but they do split after a few years. Silicone is like the modern replacement to rubber straps. It's a bit more popular now, it's a bit softer, it comes in a bunch of different colours that you can choose from, and some computers now have quick change mechanisms where you can change the straps without using any tools, which is especially useful if you're a dry suit diver, as you can easily slap a longer strap on one side and then get in the water. Fabric NATO style straps, some newer dive computers, you do have a ton of choices today, mainly in the watch sized market, so just have a look around and see what's available. Large screen dive computers, they may have twin elastic fabric straps and or mounting points for elastic bungee. The stretch in the bungee allows for compression of your suit at depth, so your dive computer stays in the way or stays exactly where you want it to. That's also what that little wavy section in a rubber watch strap is for, is to allow for a little bit of stretch of your wetsuit or your dry suit. Not a deal breaker in my eyes if the dive computer doesn't come with the exact strap that you want. Just do pay attention to the strap, and more importantly how easy it is to get replacements, because there will come a time when you need to replace your strap. Straps and batteries are going to be your long-term running costs of your dive computer over the years, and you don't want to have to shelve a dive computer because you can't get a replacement strap for it a few years down the road. This is one that a lot of divers don't notice or think about too much. There are dive computers out there that only have a single button. Granted, there are a few ways, I guess, that you can press that single button, but you still only have that one button, so navigation around the menu can be tricky. And if you miss one menu, you press the button one too many times, you have to end up going all the way through the entire menu structure to get back to where you wanted. More buttons means there's more likely to be a forward, a back, a select, and a menu button. The more buttons, the better on a dive computer, in my opinion. It just makes it easier to navigate. On from that, it's best that you get along with the menu structure. Some dive computers can be just mazes on the inside and quite hard to find that exact setting that you want unless you're used to the dive computer. If you can, see if your local dealer has one that you can play with to actually see if you get on with the menu structure. Some you just won't be able to. Watch style computers are usually in a special hibernation mode when they're brand new in box to save the battery, so don't be too grumpy with the dive center if they won't let you wake up that dive computer that they're then going to struggle to sell it as new. But yeah, visit your local dive center, make sure they got one in stock, and just ask if you're allowed to just play around and see if you can navigate the menu. We are in a very exciting time when it comes to dive computers. Before now, you'd buy a dive computer, and that would be kind of all it did. That was your dive computer. That's all it does. Watch style computers, they'd also tell you the time, and they might have some alarm features and things, but that was about it. It was primarily a dive computer. Right now, we're seeing dive computers being made that are more multi-sport, or smartwatches with scuba diving capabilities like the Apple Watch Ultra and some of the Garmin smartwatches. So now we're seeing dive computers with things like heart rate monitors, GPS, skin temperature monitoring that some Scuba Pro dive computers can use to actually tailor your dive profile based on how warm or cold you are or how hard you're working. It makes it more or less conservative based on how you're actually feeling. There are even dive computers that can attach a nitrox analyzer, and it inputs your nitrox mix directly into your computer for you. Bluetooth, so useful. It pairs your dive computer to an app on your phone, and you can download dives directly onto the phone, onto that database, instead of having to write them all out manually. And you can even change settings on your computer from your phone. So much easier when you've got a touch phone. And then just hit upload and it's done. Vibration alarms is another feature that's more prevalent now, so it can alert you without alerting the entire dive site. So there's a lot of clever new features coming out. Hopefully some or all of that information helps if you're in the market for a new dive computer. There are just a ton of things to consider when you're investing in a new dive computer. You really need to sit down and decide what sort of diver you plan to be. If you feel like you're going to go down the technical route, then maybe start considering a dive computer with those kinds of features that you can grow into. It'll be more an investment now, but it's going to be cheaper in the long run because you don't have to buy a second computer a few years down the road. Decide which features are most useful to you and which feature is most important to you. Is it going to be like it must have a color screen? Is it going to be like a rechargeable battery? And then start comparing different models that you can get hold of where you are. Consider the long-term considerations as well. If you want to check out my top 10 dive computers right now, check out this video up here and think about heading over to our website scubadivingmag.com for more advice articles like this one and more, as well as subscribing to the YouTube channel here on YouTube for more scuba diving advice. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.